Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Agri-Fishery Market Analysis webinar. I'm really excited to see many people have come here to learn about clean energy. And my name is Sonita. I work at Energy Lab. And today is the 5th day of Clean Energy Week 2021, which is organized by Energy Lab, an organization established to support the growth of clean energy markets in Cambodia. And before we start the event, I'd like to thank to Sevea and people in it for hosting and organizing this event as part of Clean Energy Week. Clean Energy Week is our annual festival, and it's about celebrating the opportunities that clean energy can bring for Cambodia, such as more jobs, more investment, sustainable economic growth, lower electricity prices, and help Cambodia to be more energy independent. And once again, this year, Clean Energy Week is an online campaign happening between the 21st to 28th of October to amplify the message that clean energy is Cambodia's best choice for a stronger economy. And before the event starts, I would like to share with everyone a video about clean energy.
Nếu ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាយើងមានតម្រូវការថាមពលអគ្គិសនីយ៉ាងច្រើនសន្ធឹកសន្ធាប់ហើយតម្រូវការនេះកាន់តែមានសន្ទុះកើនឡើងប៉ុន្តែផែនការដើម្បីបំពេញតម្រូវការថាមពលនាថ្ងៃអនាគតអាចនឹងតម្រូវឲ្យផ្លាស់ប្ដូរតែនេះមានន័យយ៉ាងដូចម្តេចចំពោះប្រទេសកម្ពុជាហើយអ្វីទៅជាឱកាសធំបំផុតសម្រាប់សេដ្ឋកិច្ចប្រទេសកម្ពុជាកាលពីរដូវប្រាំងក្នុងឆ្នាំ2019ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាប្រឈមមុខនឹងវិបត្តិថាមពលអគ្គិសនីធំបំផុតដែលមិនធ្លាប់ជួបប្រទះពីមុនមកហើយកម្ពុជាក៏បានស្វែងរកដំណោះស្រាយយ៉ាងឆាប់រហ័សដើម្បីធ្វើឲ្យប្រកាសថាវិបត្តិនេះនឹងមិនកើតសារជាថ្មីប្រទេសកម្ពុជាបានចុះហត្ថលេខាលើកិច្ចព្រមព្រៀងអនុវត្តគម្រោងរោងចក្រផលិតថាមពលដ៏ធំមួយដើម្បីទាញយកថាមពលអគ្គិសនីដែលអាចស្មើនឹង4ដងនៃអានុភាពថាមពលធ្យូងថ្មដែលកម្ពុជាបានកំពុងមានសប្តាហ៍ថ្ងៃគម្រោងថ្មីនេះរួមបញ្ចូលការទាញយកថាមពល 3.1 ហ្គីកាវ៉ាត់ពីរោងចក្រថាមពលអគ្គិសនីដែលដោយចំហេះធ្យូងថ្មនៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជានិងឡាវដែលនឹងផលិតថាមពលគួរទុកចិត្តបានសម្រាប់ពេលច្រើនឆ្នាំខាងមុខប៉ុន្តែកាលពីខែមុនលោកប្រធានាធិបតីស៊ីជីនពីងបានប្រកាសទៅកាន់មហាសន្និបាតអង្គការសហប្រជាជាតិថាចិននឹងមិនកសាងថាមពលអគ្គិសនីប្រើធ្យូងថ្មនៅបរទេសឡើយដោយសារតែក្តីបារម្ភចំពោះបរិស្ថានទន្ទឹមនឹងនេះគម្រោងថាមពលអគ្គិសនីដ៏ធំបំផុតរបស់កម្ពុជាក៏ជួបនឹងហានិភ័យ 75% នៃគម្រោងផ្គត់ផ្គង់ថាមពលរបស់កម្ពុជាត្រូវបានកសាងនិងផ្គត់ផ្គង់ដោយប្រទេសចិនតើយើងនឹងផ្ដល់ថាមពលស្របនឹងកំណើននៃតម្រូវការនេះដោយរបៀបណានេះប្រហែលមិនមែនជាបញ្ហាសម្រាប់ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាឡើយប៉ុន្តែវាគឺជាឱកាសដ៏ធំទៅវិញនៅពេលដែលគម្រោងធ្យូងថ្មនេះត្រូវបានចុះហត្ថលេខាភ្លាមៗនៅក្នុងឆ្នាំ2019នោះរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលបានធ្វើឲ្យប្រកាសថាគ្រប់គ្នាអាចប្រើប្រាស់ថាមពលអគ្គិសនីដោយគ្រប់គ្រាន់ប៉ុន្តែឥឡូវនេះគម្រោងធ្យូងថ្មទាំងនេះប្រហែលមិនអាចដំណើរការទៅមុខបានទៀតទេហើយកម្ពុជាពិតជាអាចបង្កើតជម្រើសដែលប្រសើរជាងនេះជំនួសមកវិញយើងអាចបង្កើនការទាញយកថាមពលអគ្គិសនីក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាប្រចាំខែជាជាងទាញយកជាប្រចាំឆ្នាំដោយការបង្កើតថាមពលសូឡានិងថាមពលខ្យល់នៅក្នុងប្រទេសកម្ពុជាផ្ទាល់និងថ្លឹងថ្លែងវាជាមួយនឹងអាគុយដែលដំណើរការលឿនក៏ដូចជាម៉ាស៊ីនហ្គាសក្នុងរូបភាពទូទៅយើងអាចសន្សំសំចៃថវិកាហើយយើងអាចបង្កើតវាប្រចាំតំបន់ហើយយើងក៏អាចបង្កើតការងារបន្ថែមសម្រាប់ប្រជាជនខ្មែរផងដែរមានន័យថាប្រទេសកម្ពុជាក្លាយជាប្រទេសដែលមានភាពឯករាជ្យច្រើនជាងមុនដោយមិនត្រូវការពឹងផ្អែកលើប្រទេសដទៃសម្រាប់ថាមពលដ៏ច្រើនលើសលប់នោះតែនេះអាចជាឱកាសដើម្បីឲ្យយើងគិតសារជាថ្មីអំពីអនាគតថាមពលរបស់ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាទេតែនេះអាចជាពេលវេលាដើម្បីឲ្យកម្ពុជាឆ្ពោះទៅរកការប្រើប្រាស់ថាមពលសូឡានិងថាមពលខ្យល់សម្រាប់សន្តិសុខថាមពលសេដ្ឋកិច្ចកាន់តែរឹងមាំនិងអនាគតដែលល្អប្រសើរទេដើម្បីស្វែងយល់ព័ត៌មានបន្ថែមសូមចូលទៅកាន់ Clean Energy Week 2021
Hope everyone enjoy watching the video, and I will also share the link to the video in the Zoom chat. So if you want to watch it again, you can go there, or also if you want to share it with your family or friends. And now allow me to brief everyone about the agenda of today. First, we're going to have a presentation about the introduction of the switch to solar project, then a presentation of the market sizing, and a presentation about infographic data around Tonle Sap. And lastly, a presentation on the infographic of Agri-Fishery data and related potential technologies. And if you have any questions, please type them in the chat and Q&A, and we will respond to them at the end of the presentations. And once again, thank you so much for joining Clean Energy Week. And remember to visit us on Facebook page and share our post with the hashtag I love clean energy. Now I would like to hand over to Mr. Arthur of People in Need to give an introduction of the Switch to Solar project to everyone. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Arthur.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for the introduction. I suppose that you can hear me and see me well, right? Okay, I suppose so. I'm Artur Villa. I'm the program manager of the Switch to Solar project, working for People in Need. And basically, I'm here for doing a very short presentation about what this project is about. So I will right now share my screen to go through this short presentation. Here it goes. Well, as you know, the name of the project is Switch to Solar, and we are trading for Agri-Fishery market. There are two main donors. 90% comes from the European Union, the Switch Asia Grants Program, and the remaining 10% from the Czech Republic Development Corporation. Here we see how it's organized in terms of the lead partner, People in Need, with the implementing partners working with Sevea and Energy Lab. Basically, the vision and mission that we have is, as was mentioned before, switch to solar for a thriving and agri-fishery market. And mission, well, I will just read what you're having on the screen, is adding value to the agri-fishery market by supporting the uptake of solar solutions to improve competitiveness and resilience. Basically, we want to create new business opportunities with solar technology providers. We will facilitate access to finance to end users, and establishing and deploying new innovative business in the country. With marketing solar technologies to agri-fisheries with micro, small, medium enterprises. Here it's basically the project overview. Started in 2020. It was not the best year due to COVID, but anyway, we are doing our best and moving forward. And it's a 4-year project intended needs to be finished in May 2024. Here you have some figures about the budget, and the sector is really clear, right? Agri-fisheries, renewable energy, and MSMEs. The geographical areas we are targeting, aside from Phnom Penh, we will be working, and we are working in Battambang, Kampong Chnang, Kampong Thom, Port Said, and Siem Reap. And the objective, it's very important and it needs to be really clear. It's contributing to sustainable and inclusive economic growth in rural areas of Cambodia. Main point is reducing the environmental impacts of MSMEs, energy consumption, and generating green employment opportunities. Project goal, really clear. We need to improve the consumption patterns and the behaviors in rural areas in Cambodia by supporting these micro, small, and medium enterprises so they can switch from unsustainable energy like fuel, diesel to solar energy resources. Let's jump to the key activities of the project. Market analysis. Sevea has been working on that. Market analysis and solar solution identification. Also capacity building of the, we call it STPs, solar technology providers, to reach the end users in the agri-fishery sector. We are supporting the STPs, linking them with financial intermediaries, and improving also the solar business environment, creating synergies among the stakeholders involved. Well, here we have a clearly target area, mentioning the 6 locations I said before. And here we can see what are the target groups. So let me go quickly through these 6 points. One of the indicators would be reaching, giving access to solar technology to 9,000 agri-fisheries end users. We intend to work with 10 STP solar technology suppliers, and along with 15 financial intermediary institutes like MFIs. Also, the target group will be a number of 70 market channels using retailers between the end users and the STPs. We are working with provincial departments of agriculture, forestry, and fishery in the 5 provinces I mentioned, and also with ministries like MAF. And also we are getting involved around 60 university students in incubation programs and hackathons. If I'm not mistaken, this is mainly led by Energy Lab. Well, I went pretty fast to what I think is a really interesting and complex project. My presentation finished now, so I leave the lead to Sevea right now. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you, Artur. Appreciate the overview of the Switch project. There's a lot going on within this project, and we're going to touch upon a small piece here in this presentation. But first, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity, specifically to Energy Lab for hosting and organizing this event as part of Clean Energy Week. And ultimately an opportunity to present some of Sevea's ongoing work that relates to this project. My name is Aaron Bouchain, and I'm Sevea's project manager for the Switch to Solar. So before we get started, I know Sunita kind of went into this in a little bit of detail. I'm going to provide a little bit more, but I want to talk about provide a quick agenda review with the parts that Sevea is going to cover here quickly. Can we? There we go. So I'm going to provide an overview of this work, the market sizing analysis that we've been conducting to date. I'll then turn it over to my colleague Chloe to provide some general context on the Tonle Sap region, largely including socioeconomic and energy-related data. And finally, a few more Sevea colleagues, Nils and Margot, will look at the market analysis of 4 specific solar technologies: solar egg incubator, solar hydroponics, solar water pump, and solar dryer. Next slide, please. So a little background on what we're doing and why we're doing it. As part of the Switch to Solar project, one of the first things that Sevea did was identify 10 solar solutions or applications of those solutions through an intensive assessment process. Once identified, we then launched into an analysis to understand what the market potential for each of these solutions is in the Tonle Sap region. In terms of process, well, this has included an extensive data collection process that's leaned heavily on already existing databases from the Cambodian institutions such as the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, Ministry of Planning, and the Electrical Authority of Cambodia. And as the project progresses, we'll also be including additional data that's being collected as part of the activities of this project. This includes the information that some of our field staff and PENS field staff is collecting and will continue to collect over the life cycle of this project. And then other associated activities that are part of this project, and they'll ultimately feed into the holistic understanding of this project, but into specific pieces of it, such as the market analysis. Next slide, please. And so current status, where are we? Well, like a lot of things in Switch to Solar, it's a work in progress. It's an ongoing initiative. So the first thing we did was collect a sizable chunk of data, and we've done that to date. And as you'll see through this presentation, this covers everything from topography, population densities, poverty rates, and agricultural stats. And this has allowed us to contextually understand the region and to understand the total potential for specific value chains within the 5 provinces around Tonle Sap. And then our next step within this specific activity is really to go a step further and understand the technical potential for each solar technology. It's really wrapping all this together. And that will ultimately end up in an end product. And so we have really 2 goals here. One is to just have a better understanding of the market potential for these solar applications or technologies in the agri-fishery sector, specific to the region that we're working in. And then ultimately, another benefit here is to provide or develop detailed market-specific information that would allow and better inform STPs to make smart and intentional business decisions and to engage with our target end users through this project. So that provides a quick overview. And again, I want to thank you for your time and this opportunity. And now I'll turn it over to Chloe.
Thank you, Aaron. So good morning, everyone. My name is Chloe, and I'm working at Sevea. So I will present here the general context of the Tonle Sap area, which informs all the market potential of the 10 technologies that my colleagues will later present. So I will have go over a few overview of a few key socioeconomic and energy data. Next slide, please. So that we are all aligned, Art already started to describe it, but the Switch to Solar project works in 6 provinces, one of them being Phnom Penh. We're going to put it aside for today, and we'll focus on the other 5 provinces, namely Battambang, Siem Reap, Kampong Thang, Kampong Chhnang, and Porsat, which account for over 3.6 million inhabitants. Next slide, please. So first, it's important to note that the Tonle Sap area is a rather peculiar area. The Tonle Sap Lake is the largest body of fresh water in Southeast Asia and a key part of the Mekong hydrological system. So during flood month, water flows up the Tonle Sap from the Mekong mainstream. And as the water level in the Mekong mainstream falls in late September, water flows out the lake back into the Mekong mainstream. So it's a very interesting process of flow reversal, and it's the largest in the world, which provides a very interesting ecosystem in the area, as well as interesting background to all the socioeconomic data that I'm going to present today. So as a large part of the area gets regularly flooded, it's interesting to categorize this area into 3 zones. So we're following here a categorization already done by Salmivara in 2015 of this classification. So zone 1 will be lower floodplain. It's all the areas and villages located closest to the lake, where a lot of the fishing activities happen. Zone 2 would be upper floodplain, so located within a 3 kilometer buffer beyond the national roads, that have less seasonable flooding, and is where most of the agriculture, rice and other crop cultivation will happen. And zone 3 is urban, so located in the provincial capitals as well as close to national roads. It has little to no regular flooding, and within our value chains, people in more like the business side of it, such as wholesalers and retailers, they will mostly work in those urban areas. So next slide, please. With this context in mind, it's interesting to look at the population density. So even though these 5 provinces represent a third of the total surface of Cambodia, they only account for 23% of the total population. So the density over the area, as you can see on this map, is rather low. And except in the few urban areas and along the national roads, the rest of the districts have a rather low density. And all 5 provinces rank rather at the bottom of like the 25 provinces ranked in terms of population density. Next slide, please. So then it's interesting to look at poverty rate and urbanization. So all the provinces, all the districts have quite high poverty rate. So we can see here the poverty rate is above 15% in almost all districts, and it even goes above 20 and sometimes even 30% in some districts. So we're looking at provinces that are rather poor, and especially the case of, for example, Siem Reap or Kampong Thom, that are some of the poorest provinces in Cambodia. In terms of urbanization, I mean, I've already started to hint at it, but we're looking at very rural provinces with only 6 urban areas, and the remaining districts being either rural or semi-rural along the national road. Next slide, please. And so because of this rather rural contexts, we can see that the primary sector in all 5 provinces is very important. So what I mean by primary sector is mostly the agriculture sector, but also any activities related to the exploitation of natural resources. So it also includes, for example, mining. And I mean, we all know that the agriculture sector is very important in Cambodia. It represents 23% of the country's GDP and around 1/3 to 40% of the workforce. But against this background of the national average of 40% of people working in the agriculture sector, we can see that it's much higher in our 5 provinces, where above 60% of people work in the primary sector, and even above 70% in Porsat and Kampong Thom. So very high importance of the agriculture sector, but it's also important to remember that, so in the last census, 61% of the households who worked in the agriculture sector answered that they produce mainly for home consumption. So even though a lot of people work in the agriculture sector, it's not necessarily as an income generating activity. And we can see on the opposite, the tertiary sector, meaning all, like basically any activities related to services, the tertiary sector is much, much lower in our 5 provinces, except Siem Reap. And I guess you all know why. It's because of the importance of tourism in this province. Next slide, please. So as I described, the Tonle Sap Lake rehearsal floods, we kind of understand that the area is quite prone to floods, and a large part of Cambodia is made up of floodplains. So there are floods occurring every year during the rainy season. So on this map on your left, you can see all the areas in blues are areas that are vulnerable to flooding. And we can see in our perimeter, it's mostly the eastern side of the Tonle Sap Lake. Still, if the rainy season is late, shorter, or irregular, drought episodes happen as well. And they have become increasingly frequent due to climate change. And in 2016, the National Committee for Disaster Management reported that 2.5 million people in Cambodia were directly affected by droughts. And in our target area, we see it's especially the case of the eastern side of the Tonle Sap Lake, where above 10% and sometimes even 20% of households report being severely affected by drought. So this will inform some of our market sizing, especially for technologies like solar water pump, for example. Next slide, please. So I will look now a bit more into detail into each provinces, starting with Porsat. So as you can see on this land cover map, 58% of the province is filled with dense forest and mountains from the cardamom range. So only the remaining part of the province is where agriculture can take place. So Porsat is the 4th largest province of Cambodia, but it's one of the provinces with the lowest density. And you can see that the total population is only a bit over 400,000 people. And even though, as we saw before, 70% of the household work in the agriculture sector, that represents only 66,000 holdings, which you will see compared to the other provinces is rather low. The average size of land is not too small, it's rather average with 1.89. And we see there is mostly rice production, cassava production, a little bit of corn production. The province is also known for vegetable production as well as freshwater fish production with over 20,000 tons per year. Next slide, please. Battambang is a very interesting province. It's quite unique compared to the other 5 provinces. It's the 5th most populated province in Cambodia. And we can see that the number of holdings is almost double the one in Porsat. And Battambang is indeed known to be one of the most productive provinces in terms of agriculture, and especially rice. We can see here the rice production is very, very high. Cassava production is also really high. Battambang in itself represents 1/3 of the national production of cassava. And corn production is also very important. What's also interesting to note here is the average size of land, which is the highest of our 5 provinces. And a quarter of the holdings over the areas are of large size, so above 4 hectares, and only 17% of holdings are below 1 hectare. So what usually in other provinces constitutes the bulk, like the majority of holdings, which are small holdings, here in Battambang are actually a minority of the holdings. So that's an interesting thing to note. Siem Reap, no, you can go. Thank you. Siem Reap is the 4th most populous province in Cambodia with 1 million people. The number of holdings is rather similar to the one in Battambang. Average size lower than Battambang, but higher than Porsat. What's interesting to note in Siem Reap is the importance of the fishery and aquaculture sector. It's one of the provinces in Cambodia with the highest number of aspire clusters dedicated to fish. So 33% of the clusters in the province are for fish activities. Next slide, please. Kampong Thom, it's the 2nd largest province by surface, but you can see the total population is important, but not that high, and the density, once again, is rather low. You can see that the number of holdings is rather similar to the ones in Siem Reap and Battambang, but the average size of lands is a bit smaller. Cassava production is very, very important. Rice as well. It's also important to know that Kampong Thom is one of the largest producers of cashew nuts in Cambodia, and it's the 4th largest producer of fish by aquaculture in Cambodia. So a large part of like the large pond farmers and nurseries are in Kampong Thom. And finally, next slide, please. Kampong Shnang, which is a rather peculiar province. It's much smaller. And you can see the population as well is much smaller. And a large part of the province is crossed by the branches of the Tonle Sap river, meaning that a lot of the areas are difficult to access, whether because there are floating villages or on islands, and they're very prone to flooding. So it's in this area that we find the highest number of non-electrified villages, and access to drinking water is also a major issue. So the number of holdings is much smaller than in other provinces, and most importantly, the average size of land is much, much lower. It's the smallest of all the provinces that we have seen here. And actually, more than half of the total holding over the province are below 1 hectare, and only 4% are large producers. So we're looking here at very small holdings. Still, vegetable production is rather high. There are also a lot of chicken producers, and 61% of the aspire cluster over the province are actually for chicken. Next slide, please. So before handing over to my colleagues, I just want to look quickly at the access to electricity in our area. So as you may know, electrification rates is rapidly increasing in Cambodia, and I think for above 90% of electrified villages countrywide. And you can see that this is reflected in our target provinces, except Kampong Chhnang, which, as I was saying, has the highest number of non-electrified villages. Still, what I want to point out here is that there are discrepancies between the actual electrification rate and the use of energy. Because as you can see, even if above 90 to 95% of villages in our provinces are electrified, that doesn't mean that 95% of households use the grid. And you can see here that actually in Kampong Chhnang between 50 and 70%, and in the other provinces above 70% of the households use city power, meaning the grid, as their energy source. So of course, this discrepancy is because not all households in each electrified village is actually electrified itself. And there are also discrepancies due to reliability, quality, and affordability of the grid. So that means that even though the electrification rate in Cambodia is very high, there is still a share of households that rely on other energy sources, such as batteries or diesel gensets. And that's very interesting for us because that's where solar can make sense. So next slide. And it's especially interesting to note because Cambodia has one of the strongest levels of solar radiations in the world. And as you can see on this map, it's especially the case of the Tonle Sap area that has a very high solar energy potential. So just all of this helps to understand kind of the market potential and helps inform the market potential of each single technology. And I will now hand over to my colleague, Margot and Niels, who will look a bit more into each technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe, and hello, everyone. I'm Niels, engineer in Sevea, and I will talk about the market analysis of the selected solar technologies. So we will see how do we size the market, and we'll present you simplified analysis. So we have time to present you several technologies. So we'll go roughly not too much into details to keep the presentation entertaining. So next slide, please. So I'm going to present the first technology, solar egg incubators. So egg incubator is technologies that create the perfect condition to incubate eggs and to hatch them successfully, and by maintaining it at the same temperature, at the same temperature. And so this technology is concerned only with one value chain, so it's the poultry sector, so mostly the chickens, and has several opportunities and challenges. Can you pass the next slide? Yeah. So this technology has several opportunities, as I was saying. So the incubating technology is very good for the productivity. It improves the hatching rate and reduces the hatching time. And it's very suitable for large production, so mostly for commercial farmers, because as you can see on the picture, there is a lot of eggs on the relatively small devices. So, so it's very good for large production. And on top of this, it reduces the labor cost. So, but this technology has a few challenges. When the hatch is successfully done, the farmer needs to come with other investment, for example, hen houses to keep the young chicks and to sell it after. And there is a whole problematic of behavior change. Like the farmers needs to stop their traditional way of doing chicks and like switch to new technologies. And some of them could be reluctant to change to these new technologies. The last challenge is the constant energy needed. So indeed, the solar incubators cannot afford to be stopped for half a day. It will kill the whole batch of eggs. And so it's very important to have a constant energy needed. And it's one of the big advantages of the solar technologies. Because with a good sized solar system, there is no change. The solar egg incubator will face blackouts, but has other issues like challenges such as the use of batteries. So, but when we go deeper on the analysis, and we can draw maps. Yes, you can pass the slide. Yeah. So we can draw maps thanks to the government data and so thanks to the government data, we can like draw precise map on the communal level thanks to the commune database. Here's a map of the district, but we can do the same for the communes that counts the number of head of chicken in each district and communes and provinces. So on the map, we see that the production of chicken is rather unequal between the district. There is some district when the production is less than 50,000 heads, and some of them when there is more than 1 million, which the big numbers is no surprise as the poultry sector is one of the main in Cambodia with annual increase of 60%. So it's still increasing. And we can estimate that around 1 every 2 Cambodian is involved in the production of poultry or livestock. So what does this map say to us? So we can already highlight some area where the production is high or like smaller, high or small. And we like see there is some district in Battambang province next to Battambang city where the production is very high in a small district, which could, we can already say that maybe there is a big commercial farmers or a big industry there that produce chicken. But what we do for the market sizing is that we combine these maps with other maps. So can you pass the next slide? So for example, I don't know if you see the map on the left. We combine the map of the production of chicken with the Aspire cluster. So that's an agricultural cluster. So smallholder farmers that gather together to create a cluster. So we see, for example, as Chloe was saying, in Kampong Chnang province, there is a lot of clusters that have been identified. It shows that there is a lot of smallholder farmers, and for example, these smallholder farmers are already gathered in communities, so it's maybe easier to reach them. And in, for example, Persat province, we see that there is not a lot of cluster. But what's really interesting here is the map on the right. We see the total potential of the district. We call total potential the total number of holdings identified, and we see there is huge difference between the district, province. Sorry, in Battambang we see there is 30,000 of holdings, and only 30,000 of holding in Battambang and 80,000 of holding in Kampong Tom. As we looked before, there is approximately the number of households in this province is approximately the same, but the average size of the holding is much bigger in the Battambang, which could mean that there is more big producer of chicken in Battambang. So more, you can pass the next slide, but more big producer of chicken in Battambang and rather more small producer in Kampong Tom province. So just to explain a little bit more, this is a provincial map, so it's a big scale map, and that doesn't help us that gives us some insight, but doesn't help us to retarget a specific place because it's on a provincial level. But all the database we have we have the same on the communal level. So we are conducting analysis to estimate the technical potential on a way more precise level. So at the communal level, using the data we have on the cluster and the cooperative that are identified. And also we can have really more precise information. So this gives you insight and rough explanation on how we do this, but we do the same on a more precise way for more calculation. So I'm going to talk about the second technology now, solar hydroponic. If you don't know what hydroponic is, it's a type of agriculture when the crops are growing into a nutrient solution instead of the soil. It's used a water pump to have a constant water flow in the systems, and the farmers put nutrients in the water, so the nutrient flow around the pipes and allow the crops to grow. And that's most of the time under a greenhouse. And as of solar egg incubators, this technology has several opportunities. Of course, for productivity, the system improves the productivity and requires less space to grow vegetables. And the big advantage of solar hydroponic is that it's independent from the climate. Usually, the farmers have trouble during the peak of the dry season or the peak of the rainy season to grow the vegetables. But thanks to hydroponics and greenhouse too, the production is completely independent from climate, and the farmers can grow vegetables all over the year. So that's a huge advantage of this technology. And there is, of course, challenges. So as I was saying, you need to make hydroponic works, you need to have a pump, a water pump, which is pretty specific, hair blower too, sensor to measure the acidities, and some technical pipes too. So this is hard to find equipment because they are rather technical, and it can be hard to find this equipment in rural area. There is the problem of investment too. With all this technical investment, the investment is needed to do this technology is rather high, and as the quality of the product is better with hydroponics, they will not sell the vegetables directly to the local market and try to reach the supermarket in the urban area, but that's what we call premium market, and that creates a new problem of supply chain for the farmers when they are really in a low density area. And of course, there is the problematic of behavior change. So this is a new technology which is pretty hard to understand at first, and so the farmers can be reluctant to change from the traditional way of growing crops to this. But so the technology gap is pretty high. Okay, so let's take a look at the map now. So here is a map of the vegetables produced in the area planted with vegetables in these provinces. So first we see that the percentage of the cultivated area looks rather small, and it's the same in all over Cambodia, as only 1.3% of the total cultivated area in Cambodia is planted with vegetables. That's mostly because there is mostly smallholder farmers that are growing vegetables, and vegetables is a very labor-intensive crop. So the farmers do not have a big surface of vegetables. But let's take a look at the map now. So the map shows the type of crops into categories of vegetables, like fruit-bearing vegetables and leafy vegetables mostly. For hydroponics, the most interesting value chain are the fruit-bearing vegetables and the leafy vegetables that really suits well with the technologies. So we're going to target as first the province, the district, and the commune, where the vegetables produced are already the one good for hydroponics. So of course, the first province we see is Persat. So Persat province has more than half of the production of vegetables coming from Persat province is fruit-bearing vegetables and leafy vegetables. So that's the one with the highest potential for the technology for a province. So you can turn the next slide. So Persat province looks very interesting, but when we look at Battambang province and Siem Reap province, we see that the fruit-bearing vegetables is about half of the produced vegetables, which means that the potential is high in this area too. And finally, when we look to Kampong Thom and Kampong Chhnang province, where the mostly produced crop is mung bean, it doesn't mean that there is no potential for hydroponic in this area, because we need to conduct more precise analysis on a smaller scale level. And even though there is no fruit-bearing vegetables or leafy vegetables, people can have interest into these technologies. But as first, when we do the first try with this technology, we'd like to focus ourselves mostly on the value chain that are already concerned by the technology. So we target farmers that are already familiar with this value chain, so fruit-bearing vegetables and leafy vegetables. All right, that was some rough analysis for these two technologies. So now I will leave Margot present you the solar water pump and the solar dryer technology. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Niels. So hello, everyone. My name is Margot Bardet, and I'm a consultant at Sevea and pleased to be involved in the discussion today. So I will continue the presentation with a focus on two big technologies, the solar water pump and the solar dryer. So why specific? Because as we will see in the next slides, a particular characteristic for both of these technology is their immense versatility. So first, and in the case of Switch, we looked at the potential of water pumping solution for the following value chain. For rice, as solar water pump can be used for supplementary irrigation of fields during the wet season and full irrigation during the dry season. For vegetable, as solar water pump are used, can be used for daily irrigation. For aquaculture, water pump here can be used to empty and fill the ponds, or for water exchange also during the production cycle. For pig, and this can be extended to livestock in general, as water pump are used for the daily cleanup. And for fruit, especially for high value plantation crops, as water pump are used here for regular fields irrigation. So plus for each value chain, we examine the adoption potential of water pumping solution for different type of stakeholders. So needs are not only differentiated by type of value chain, but also by type of actors. And as an example, for the aquaculture value chain, we looked at smallholder and commercial farmers, but also nurseries and hatcheries. So then the potential of adoption also depends on the opportunities and constraints of the technology. And here a few examples are presented to highlight this. So for instance, one of the biggest opportunity is that it is a mature technology and several technology providers are already distributing it. It is good for large and regular water usage, especially considering the cost of solar. Also, powering it, solar helps to reduce the production costs and maintenance, mainly for farmers using diesel water pump. In terms of challenges, first is the high competition of diesel pumps, grid pumps, but also poorly made solar water pumps. And poor quality really affects the trust of farmers in solar water pump because they have had bad experience. And also it makes less sense for irregular water usage. For instance, rice farmer producers who grow rice only during the wet season rice, then solar water pump do not make sense because they use it only 2 or 3 times per cycle and only during the wet season. And another constraint is that there are pressure constraints because with solar it is hard to achieve the exact pressure needed. So the sizing of the system has to be very precise, and this can be problematic for some water delivery system, such as a drip irrigation system. Similarly, to look at the potential of solar dryer, we had to look at the different value chains. So horticulture value chain, which includes vegetable, fruits, nuts, herbs, and spices, then dried fish and dried meat, which is also true for pig. So here again, to illustrate the potential for adoption, we had to consider the different stakeholder profiles. So for example, there are here smallholder farmers drying part of their production, commercial farmer, but also farmer organizations such as agricultural cooperatives that will buy one dryer, which can be used by several farmer members. Aggregators were also considered as buyer of the production from different farmers and then drying it, or only many processor specialized in fish or meat drying. So to assess the adoption potential, we also had to consider here opportunities and constraints of the solar dryer. And as highlighted here, one of the main opportunity is that it improves the hygiene and quality of the product. It is done in a controlled environment, protected from dust or flies, and so on. Another opportunity is that there is a large market for dried products locally. And also that solar dryer can help reduce drying time and dependency on weather, especially it enables drying during the wet season. And regarding the main challenges, so the main challenge here is the competition with sun drying, as it is free. There is also taste preference for sun drying products from some customers, or the fact that there is a need to optimize the use of the dryer by using it at an optimum capacity. So when using 100 kilogram capacity, for instance, it will make sense to dry 100 kilogram regularly. So therefore, and I won't go in the details of this table, but this is to really illustrate the complexity of the sizing the market for this technology. And it is even more complicated with such versatile technologies, as we need to evaluate a potential considering all the different value chain, the different stakeholders involved in those value chain, and which profiles should be targeted or not. And linking all of this with the technology's opportunity or constraints in order to establish assumption and deduce final adoption potential. So to understand the size of the market, the first step is to look at the number of economic units or number of holdings for the value chains in which the technologies can be applied. And as it is illustrated here, such data can be used for different technologies. For example, it is interesting to understand the number of holdings involved in fruits, pigs, or aquaculture when looking at both solar water pump and solar dryer. Then to present some results of this market sizing exercise for both solar water pump and solar dryer, I will focus here on the aquaculture value chain. So the aquaculture and fishery sectors play a key role in Cambodia. The sector is still at an early stage of development, but production is on the rise, and there is significant annual growth reported. According to national statistics, more than 300,000 metric tons were produced in 2019. And the importance of the sector is also revealed by the fact that fish provides around 66% of daily animal protein for Cambodian. This map shows then the importance of the aquaculture activity in the provinces around the Tonle Sap. And the annual report of fisheries 2019 reveals a number of labor involved in this activity higher in Pursat province, and with overall high level of activity in the other provinces around. This second map presents the number of ponds that are used for fish production, and reveals that there is a higher number of ponds and then higher potential for solar water pump in Pursat province, which coincide with the previous map. And as I was saying earlier, we look at the different stakeholders involved in the value chain to estimate the potential and to size the market, which is why for the aquaculture value chain, as an example, we looked at the fingerlings production, which was reported as higher in Pursat and Kampong Thom provinces in 2019. And therefore, this map reveals that those two provinces bear higher potential when targeting at hatcheries and nurseries. So in parallel, within the aquaculture value chain, we looked at post-harvest stages, as fish drying could represent a very good opportunity for solar dryer. So the importance of the sector is highlighted here. More than 9,000 metric tons of dried fish were produced in 2019, and a recent study also reveals that 95% of fish processors do not meet minimum quality standards. So this could be improved by using solar dryer technology. And in addition, average consumption per household is relatively high and confirm the market opportunity. So this map, using 2019 data, exposes higher production in Kampong Tom province. So this area could represent a higher market opportunity for solar dryers. However, it is interesting to combine this map with the location and number of processors, as they will be the final end user of the technology. And this map represents the number of labor involved in fish processing, but it has limits, as the data available and data that were used here combine labor involved in the processing of dried fish, but also fermented or smoked fish. Therefore, this analysis gives a first level of mapped information and helps to understand the location and scale of the productions to better understand the market potential, and specifically in the 5 target provinces of switch to solar. This first level of analysis and the key information were presented here at provincial level to provide an overview of this work, but the analysis was conducted at scale, and results of our analysis are available at district or commune levels. And so also we presented part of the work for few selected technologies, but we wanted to say that this analysis has been conducted for 6 different solar technologies, and the results will be shared during the Clean Energy Week. And finally, the next steps to finalize this analysis will be, as Aaron was presented at the beginning, will be to estimate the technical potential, which will be estimated by defining assumption and combining all the results accumulated so far. Thank you for your attention. And now we still have some time for the question and discussion. So over to you, Sonita.
Thank you so much, Margot, and all the speakers today for sharing such insightful information and knowledge to our participants. Now I would like to invite everyone to turn on your video and have answering the questions too. Some of the questions that our attendees have dropped in the chart. Yes, so we have several questions in the chat, and some of the question has already been answered, and there are some questions that have not yet. So a question is about what are the main challenges of domestic chicken supply chain and how to deal with those challenges?
Hi, Sonita, and hi, everyone. So my name is Cecile, and I'm the director of Sevea, so working on this assignment as well with my team. And what are So this specific presentation is to show about some of the results that we are having in terms of market sizing. A lot of the questions that have been asked today are completely relevant, but we would have to go a little bit into too many details. The analysis have been conducted for the last year and a half now. So we will be sharing on each one of the technologies, and in each technology, as it was presented to you, it includes different value chain. So for each technology, we will be sharing with you during this Clean Energy Week some techno packages that includes a couple of different type of information. For those that are further interested, please don't hesitate to contact us, because there are short reports that can be sent in additions where we have more information in this. And in those packages, what can be found, it's basically for each technology combined with each value chain, the main challenges, socioeconomic analysis, demand analysis, supply analysis, financing analysis, so both in terms of return on investment, but also in terms of how end user financing, and so we won't go into the detail of each value chain and each technology challenges, but this can be shared with you, and of course happy to answer any questions later on if you have, go over either through email or go through a call. That's the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to add is we've already had 2 webinars that were introduced that were done on some specific technologies. I think we had one on solar water pump and one on cold storage earlier this year. We will continue to have those others organized, and I think the next one might be on chicken egg incubators and probably dryers. So yeah, this is to answer 2 of the question that I've seen. And I think, yeah, let me quickly see if there are others. Also, maybe reinforcing what Margot was saying, and some of the comments that we've seen in the chat. What you've seen today are the total potential, and of course, as was mentioned, each one needs to be there needs to be a coefficient that is applied to this total potential based on specific criteria and parameters. And so the demand, of course, the reduction of costs, but not only. Farmers do purchase technology not only and switch not only if it reduces operational cost, but if it has an increase for example, in terms of productivity, you can also have farmers purchasing some of those technologies. So that's why later on, so we are still finalizing the aggregation of those parameters to be capable of coming to the final potential, taking into account all those parameters regarding each technology, adoption, and value chain. So for those that are interested in having more details, we can definitely have a follow-up call to go a little bit more in detail.
Thank you, Cecil, for your answer, and we hope that we answered your questions. And we have another questions in the Q&A from Seti. He asking regarding the solar dryer, and what is the cost effective for them to shift from their traditional dryer to solar dryer?
So on this, just let me see if someone from my team is capable of having it right now, because as I say, this goes a little bit more in detail than what we were planning on presenting now. But otherwise we will be sharing after.
So if I can start to answer to this question, for solar dryer, we looked in, as Cecile started to mention, for each technology, we conducted the economic analysis of the technology for different types of stakeholders. So in the specific case of solar dryers, we looked at farmers, smallholder farmers in the horticulture sector, aggregators and farmer organization in the horticulture sector, as well as fish processors. So I don't know what kind of fish processors in terms of size of the actors you were referring to, but we looked at small fish processors with a fish drying volume of 20 kilograms per day. And the payback period is rather low at around 1 year, but please bear in mind that it really depends on the selling price, especially the selling price of the dried fish. So we're looking at a kind of a window of between 1 to 2 years, depending on the species of the fish and the drying window, the selling price of the dried fish, and the quantity dried. But that's, I think, is the first level of answer that we can give you. If you want more detail, we can send you, you can ask us, so our emails are in the chat box. You can ask us more specific questions if you have them. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chloe. And we answered the question, Sati. And there's another questions about, are there any feedback from end user who are using those technologies under the existing projects on their efficiency and return on investment?
So yes, as Chloe and I mentioned previously, so last year, that's what we did, was both getting feedbacks from SRET and Aspire technologies that have been already adopted. And just to let you know, so we were working on the SRET project. So those technologies, we have been seeing them for the last 2 years and observe the adoption by end users. And also at the beginning of Switch, we did some interviews to get feedback. So that's why we have both the quantitative analysis and qualitative analysis where we discuss with farmers, and the other ones are where we did the return on investment based on some case studies.
Yes, thank you, Cecile. And we have another question from Kuntal. I hope I pronounced your names right. How many potential market for solar supplier of solar dryer, and what specific size of the MSME, specifically referred to the processor?
So the first question is how many solar dryers there are. We would need to check. Not so many right now, solar dryer companies, but there are a few companies that are proposing some technologies now. The second one, I don't really understand what is the question in terms of MSMEs. Is it MSMEs that would be client of the solar dryers? Yeah, if Kuntal can specify this question.
Yes, thank you, Cecile and Kuntal. I'm not sure, Mr. Holmes. Yeah, if you would like to elaborate your question more regarding the second question, what specific side of MSME, you can raise your hand to elaborate more to our panelists so we can help answer your questions. And we got another questions. Yes. And then regarding the criteria of potential market of solar egg incubator and solar dryer, we haven't answered this question, right? Yeah. Yep, Cecil or anyone, can you answer?
So if I can start to answer, it's a very difficult answer to give you because so each technology, the potential is made up of a lot of criteria. So one of them, of course, is the number of value chains that can be targeted by the technology, the type of stakeholders that can be targeted by the technology, whether the solar technology in itself is an efficient replacement of the current methods. So for your question in terms of pumping and drying, then we look at the economic viability of the investment, so the return on investment, the energy efficiency and so forth. And then you need to look also at the commercial viability. So really a lot of criteria. I think it would be going into too much detail to detail each criteria for the specific to technology that you are mentioning here. But I invite you to read the techno packages that we're soon gonna share. And yes, and solar dryer, we will soon have a webinar on it normally. So stay tuned. I guess we should be answering some of your questions.
Yes, thank you, Chloe. We still have several minutes, other minute for the questions. So another questions again from Contil. On behalf of the business operator, I might think about volume of prospect customers. Example, there are 2,000 potential customers would possible purchase my products or technology. So his question is, do the study include this in market sizing?
Yes, it includes in the market sizing. As Chloe mentioned, we are combining all the several parameters, such as, of course, the number of crops or area planted. We are like adding the socio-economic information we gathered, like for example, the poverty rate, if you want to target more or less poverty rate area. Same to access to energy. Like we are like mapping the grid and to see if the area we are targeting already have access to the grid or not. So this is a long process, and the last thing we are taking into account is how the technology is developed. Are the user already aware or unaware of this technology? Some of the technologies, for example, solar egg incubator, are already, the farmers are already aware of it. Some of them are like not aware at all. So depending on this, we calculate the potential, and the answer will, the end product will give is an estimate of the volume of prospect customers, as Contel was saying. So this will be included in the final product. For now, we only presented the total potential, but we are refining this to have, using all the parameters I mentioned, to have an estimate of the prospect customer.
Yes, thank you, Neil. So now we have 2 minutes before we end our webinar. I will choose another questions. One last question. So Mr. Contel has clarified regarding his previous question, what specific size of MSME? For here, he means the customer to purchase solar technology. So
yes, so basically, the webinar is finishing now, what we will do is, Kuntal, we will have a follow-up discussion with you. The same Shetty and Olivier Olivier will try to answer to your question because we don't have it straight away. So we'll come back to you to answer this question. So far, Shetty, so the solar dryer, in parallel with Switch, we are right now conducting some demo sites, and the objective is exactly the one that you were saying, so that it's not kind of generic, because some of the information that we've had, and to be capable of doing some return on investment calculation, we had to look at a few fish species. Through the demo site, we'll try to look at others. We don't have all the detailed information that you were mentioning now, but we are trying to look also at what it looks like for fish processor. As was mentioning Olivier, at a first stage, definitely it was for hatcheries that it made most sense. But this is still ongoing. These analyses are still ongoing, and especially through the demo sites that we are starting now.
Okay, thank you, Cecile. Yes, as we are coming to the end now, I would like to say thanks to everyone for joining the webinar this morning, and thanks to all our panelists for sharing such insightful and valuable knowledge to our attendees today. And we will share the presentations to you as soon as possible after the webinar. And if you want to learn more about clean energy and join other events of Clean Energy Week, please navigate to the Clean Energy Cambodia Facebook page, and hope everyone stays safe and well. Thank you, and goodbye, everyone.